Welcome to What to Watch Wednesdays, hosted by someone's favorite film buff, Nathan. I love movies and I want to share that with you. From old originals to cult classics and foreign favorites, along with straight up drivel, WWW is your place for all things movies. Stick around and we'll leave you with a movie to watch over the weekend with your family or that special someone. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the show.
88.1 The Burg, your music central. My name is Nathan, and welcome to What to Watch Wednesdays. So tonight we have 3 movies on our watch list, as we tend to do here on What to Watch Wednesdays. So to briefly introduce them, let me kind of give you a bit of a history when it comes to the 3 movies that I review on What to Watch Wednesdays. Usually when I talk about movies, I like to talk about them in terms of categories. At least I like to categorize them under a specific idea or something kind of related to the movie itself. Usually that kind of boils down to 3 movies by the same director, 3 movies of the same genre, or 3 movies that are in a sort of collective series, that kind of thing. This is probably the first time I've ever done a series of 3 movies that are not directly related to each other in terms of their plot, storyline, or directors, but they are definitely connected in a specific way. More so, rather officially, rather than sometimes when I've even talked about movies that are unofficially connected. These movies are technically officially connected to each other. And that is because they are all produced by the same company, a company by the name of A24. Now, for those of you who are even mildly plugged into modern film industry talk, A24 has made a name for itself as kind of the big indie darling. It kind of stacks up against big names like Disney and DreamWorks and all the big sort of massive conglomerates that tend to control the film industry. And yet A24 stands out far and away as being a fan favorite, which is kind of surprising, but it's also worth examining why that is. And to do that, it makes sense to kind of talk about 3 of their more popular movies, or at least 2 of them, and then throw in an extra one that I wanted to talk about more specifically. So tonight we're going to be talking about Everything Everywhere All at Once from 2022, The Green Knight from 2021, and The Lighthouse from 2019. So stick around after the break where we'll jump into our first movie of the watch list. 88.1 The Burg, your music central. Welcome back to What to Watch Wednesdays. For our first movie on the watch list tonight, we are going to be taking a look at the movie Everything Everywhere All at Once from 2022, available to watch on Netflix. So this is going to be an interesting one, because normally I talk about movies older than 2 years ago, but I decided to forget the rules and kind of just go with whatever, because they tend to do that with this movie, and we're going to explore why. So this movie, in case you aren't familiar, is about a woman by the name of Evelyn, who is an Asian American and is being audited by the IRS. And then, and that's the entire movie. You know, it's like over 2 hours long. It's really it's just a very simple story about avoiding being audited by the IRS. It takes place in an IRS building, and nothing interesting happens after that, really. It's just kind of a boring. I'm cracking up halfway through, because if you are familiar with this at all, then you know exactly why this is an absolute lie on my end. I am very much downplaying it for the sake of comedic effect, because it's not very simple. Simple is kind of the opposite of exactly everything this movie stands for. Hey, everything, that's part of the title. Everything Everywhere All at Once. I'm not going to call it that title anymore, because it's such a mouthful to say over and over again that I'm just going to call it EEAO, okay? That sounds like the lyrics to Old MacDonald Have a Farm. But to get back to the movie specifically, again, it came out 2 years ago, and I can remember back 2 years. I haven't forgotten everything quite yet. But back when this movie was coming out, people were really hyping up the idea that you should go into this movie blind. I've sometimes said that about movies before, to varying degrees of success and failure, but everything EEAO, is one of the few movies that I can fully concede to that. It really does kind of fold in on itself if you know the general premise of the thing. And trust me, I may have just told you what was the general premise of the thing, but that's really just like the brief little tagline. And not even that, like saying that Evelyn gets audited by the IRS is the beginning of the tagline, because then it explains exactly what happens right after that. Everything that she goes through, everything that happens over the course of the movie. And weirdly enough, that's still a spoiler for it. You will have expectations going into the movie if you read past that first half of the sentence. So I'm just going to read the first half and leave it right there. It has been 2 years, and there's a good chance that a lot of people have seen it, especially after a lot of its Oscar wins. It did win Oscars, very specifically and clearly, and deservedly, in my opinion, at least. But it's still worth the 1% chance that somebody listening to this has never seen the movie, has no idea what I'm talking about, and may be interested after I explain some of the real strengths of the movie, that I really wouldn't want to ruin it for them. And so I'm just going to keep it simple and not spoil too much. The big things to really keep in mind about EEAO is that the cast is just so good. The cast, it almost like I had to stop and think for a second, because it's just like, who do I specifically point out? And the list of who I'm going to point out is long enough already. People like Michelle Yeoh, Ke Huy Quan, Stephanie Hsu, excuse me. I don't really know my pronunciations of some of these names perfectly, but Jamie Lee Curtis on top of all three of the main lead actors. Jamie Lee Curtis as well. They are all phenomenal in their respective roles. They kill it every single time they're on screen. I love them all. They earn the praise that they've gotten for their roles in this movie, especially Ke Huy Quan. Like, people have always said that basically he went dormant in his career for like at least a decade. He wasn't making movies for a long time. And then he comes back with EEAO, and people love him again. They're like, whoa, this guy resurfaced, and look at what kind of movie he's in now. Look at him. Look at him go. And it's well deserved. He's a really good actor, honestly. But I will say he doesn't hold as high of a torch as Michelle Yeoh. She's just wonderful. She carries the emotional core of this movie so incredibly strongly. And that leads nicely into the next point about the movie, which is that no matter how weird and crazy it will get, because it does get crazy. If you haven't seen it, it gets very weird. Almost relatively fast. It takes a little while to get there, but when it gets weird, it stays weird. Despite all of that, Michelle Yeoh hardcore carries the very real, very present emotional core of the movie. I'll say this, despite every weird occurrence happening in the movie, this is the movie that I think I've cried at the most. And I don't even mean like I've cried multiple times during the course of the movie. I didn't even do that. I cried once at the near the very end, but it was like a lot. I cried at movies like Good Will Hunting and The Iron Giant. This movie I was half on my way to like bawling my eyes out. So the emotional core is definitely there. If it makes a person like me cry, because I'm always on the verge of crying when watching a movie, but especially, or at least one that's incredibly emotional. I'm not going to cry while watching Star Wars because I know how Star Wars ends. But it's just an overall idea of a sort of form, a sort of state of mind, for me at least, to not cry unless it's absolutely necessary when watching a movie. EEAO definitely deserved that necessity call out. And I will say as well that the last 40 minutes are objectively the best part of the movie. It just keeps going and going and going, and it still keeps building up that emotion for pretty much the entire span of it, that I was like, I can't stay in this emotional state for so long. How do you expect me to stay that way for so long? But it somehow forced me through it. So good on them for just doing that in and of itself. I will also say again, it is bizarre. This movie is not known for being normal. It plays with a lot of high concept ideas, especially ones that were kind of mainstream around the time it was coming out. Again, I'm not giving away too many spoilers. Just keep in mind that it may have been influenced by this idea pushed by the Marvel Cinematic Universe. That feels like it's given away too much already. Just keep in mind that a lot of the ideas that Marvel was playing with, EEAO looked at and went, I'm going to steal that, but I'm going to do it better. And it did. But it also resulted in some very weird results because of it. Some very strange parodies, some very, very strange visuals that you either like or you don't like. There's no in between. If you like it, it's really weird that you do like it. And if you don't like it, it's incredibly fair that you don't like it. But also, why is it in the movie? If there's a good portion of the people that aren't going to like it, it's a whole thing. And what I want to say is that because of all these weird visuals, some of them are so incredibly weird that it's like it earns the R rating that it eventually got. It definitely doesn't try too hard to get to that point, but it definitely deserves it after the things you see while watching the movie. But I don't want that to detract away from the fact that the movie itself is such a strong work of cinema. I've heard people say it's overrated. I know, and I get the sentiment, but I also cried more at this movie than I have at any other movie I've ever seen. So I can't really side with the overrated side. I have to go with it's just that good of a movie. You can't, you're allowed to not like it, but I personally can't recommend it enough. And to kind of move on to a movie that I wouldn't recommend fully, a movie that I don't have as many good things to say about. After the break, we're going to be taking a look at The Green Knight from 2021. So stick around for that. 88.1 The Burg, your Music Central. Welcome back to What to Watch Wednesdays. And for our second movie on the watch list tonight, we are going to be taking a look at The Green Knight from 2021, available to watch on Max or HBO Max, whatever. So the basic overall story of the movie is it is about Sir Gawain or something. So however you pronounce Gawain. I don't really know because I don't speak Arthurian. I don't speak like King Arthur level of Old English. But regardless of how you pronounce his name, he is a young royal who ends up encountering the Green Knight, this nature-based sort of primordial knight who walks into the castle one day on Christmas Day specifically, asking for a challenger, a brave knight, to land a blow on him and saying that 1 year from now, whichever knight lands the blow on me, 1 year from now will meet me at the Green Knight's chapel in the woods, and I will return the exact same blow that knight gave me. So if he cut me in the arm, I'll cut the knight in the arm. If he cut off my head, I'm going to cut off that knight's head. And as it turns out, Sir Gawain cuts off the Green Knight's head. Oopsies. So now Gawain has to deal with the fact 1 year later that he must now go on a quest to meet the Green Knight at the chapel in the woods and face his destiny of getting his head chopped off. Oops. It seems kind of like a movie that take the wind out of your sails, but weirdly enough, it isn't. I don't think I really noticed how incredibly hopeless the situation of the movie is until really talking about it. Because honestly, during the movie, they keep the tension up enough that you just go, oh man, I wonder what's going to happen next. When in reality, you have to think to yourself, wait, he's just going to go get his head chopped off. What's so enthralling about that? But to kind of cut to the chase, one of the biggest strengths of The Green Knight is that it has Dev Patel in it as Gawain. Dev Patel is such a wonderful actor, and I've only seen him in two things. I saw him in the recently released Monkey Man, which he co-wrote, directed, and was the star of. And it was such a wonderfully compelling and rich movie that I absolutely adored, that I wanted to watch another movie with him in it. And the most well-known one that I'd seen at least was the movie The Green Knight, and it also was produced by A24, which also happened to distribute Everything Everywhere All at Once. So I was like, might as well theme it around A24. I've been watching some of their movies lately, some movies coming from that company, so it kind of fits. And I wasn't disappointed in Dev Patel's acting. There are other things I wasn't disappointed in while watching The Green Knight. Certain things, such as the pace of the movie. The movie was incredibly fast for being a 2 hour and 5 minute long fantasy epic journey movie. it weirdly felt contained and moved pretty fast for its runtime. And even if it was like, okay, about 20 minutes in, now we're going to do the whole thing where he goes out, where he leaves the kingdom to go confront the knight. That's still like within 30 minutes. That's more than enough time to set up the story. Like that's perfect. That's a perfect amount of time. But it also has like really good cinematography, like really good. Somehow with them cutting back and forth and like in order to achieve that sense of pace, in order to make it feel like it's moving along at a very fast tempo, in order to kind of keep up the tension, normally that kind of thing might limit how well you can execute good cinematography. With a movie like this where it's like 30 minutes, okay, now he's leaving. You would think, because part of the reason this tempo feels so fast is that they're cutting between camera angles constantly. And so you tend to think to yourself, okay, it's not going to be as like well executed in the cinematography department. There's no way they're going to put a bunch of effort into setting up each shot so that it looks perfect. Like it's great when they do that, but because of the pace, it makes more sense to not make every frame look like a picture or a beautiful frame in order to keep the pace up so that audiences don't tend to lag behind on that shot and go, why'd you cut away from it? It looked good. But weirdly enough, they do exactly that. They decide, no, we're going to make it look good. We're going to make it feel motivated. We're going to make it feel unique and interesting and good to look at. So it could have worked against itself, but it really doesn't. Almost in a way, like they keep the intention there and they keep the fast pace, but they make sure not to clash them too much. What I'm trying to say is that sure, there are a lot of shots that look very good, and sure, they cut between it very fast. But it's not like they're cutting so fast that you don't get a chance to look at the pretty frames. And because it's moving so fast, it doesn't feel out of place for it to have the pretty looking frames. It's not so fast that it's unmanageable. It just kind of bleeds through at certain points. But it never clashes directly. It never causes an issue. But, again, and there's always a but. There's always but this. Specifically, I want to point out that the movie has one real issue. Multiple issues, actually. As a story, I think the idea is good. I like the idea of, in 1 year, you will receive a blow back. Sure, you've got me hooked in. The problem is in order to tell kind of a fable story, you can't have a character go through zero development as he goes to face his destiny of getting his head chopped off. Do you want me to care about the character or not? And the problem with the Green Knight is it doesn't make me care about Dev Patel's character. It doesn't make me care about Gawain enough for me to go, no, I don't want him to get his head chopped off. As it turns out, that might have been possibly intentional. But at the same time, it's like, this is like, for more context, I really should have opened and said that it's really about, the alarm there, sorry. It's really about, it's set in the King Arthur sort of timeline. It's set within the King Arthur mythos region sort of idea. And so when I hear that kind of thing, I think of heroes and I think of knights who are willing to sacrifice everything. And Gawain is absolutely not that. So it creates this dissonance of me going, when is he going to be a good guy? When is he going to stand up for himself and actually do something about a situation? And the spoiler alert is that he never really does. It doesn't seem like he ever is going to, which is kind of just disappointing. It's not necessarily a fun experience to watch someone constantly struggle, but not really do anything to prevent himself from failing. You know, it's one of those weird middle points. It also has a couple ambiguous parts, which again doesn't mix well with the King Arthur mythos. Usually with King Arthur or heroic stuff, it's like, and then the hero vanquished the mighty dragon and married the princess at the end. With this movie, they're just like, it's set during King Arthur times, yes, but we're not going to tell you what year specifically it happened in, so you can't historically correct us. We're going to make the ending very ambiguous. What actually happens? Who knows? We don't know the answer. It's like, that's not a good answer. What do you mean? We don't know the answer. Why is that not good? You're going to love that. No, I'm not. I'm not going to love it. I'm just going to be a little annoyed. But the real reason I wanted to talk about The Green Knight, and I know I've kind of waffled about to kind of get to that point, but there is one sort of saving grace, and I will say this right now. The Green Knight made me realize that I should not be relying on number scores when I try to figure out what movie I want to watch. This movie had such a weird dissonance between the IMDB reviews and the Rotten Tomato reviews that I was like, there's no way it could be good. And I watched it and I was like, the weird intricacies and the weird failings mixed with the good elements of this movie do not equate into a number that makes any sense by the systems used by these websites. And so I'm just going to give up on that and not worry about it and just try to get something out of the movie. And weirdly, I did. What I got out of the movie is that I was not misplaced in my absolute adoration for Dev Patel as an actor. So at least it achieved that. We are going to speaking of actors that I actually do love after watching the movie even more, our next movie, The Lighthouse, which we will talk about after the break, is definitely one of those movies. So stick around for that. Welcome back to What to Watch Wednesdays. For our last movie on the watch list tonight, we are going to be taking a look at The Lighthouse from 2019, available to watch on Max. So for those of you who have never heard of this movie before and you're wondering, is it about a lighthouse? Yes, it very much is. It is set during 1890, where two men are basically sent to a deserted remote island with just a lighthouse on it and assigned the tasks of maintaining the lighthouse for about 4 weeks. During the course of that, because it's just the two of them and they both have kind of conflicting viewpoints on a lot of different things, and also because of all the spiritual gobbledygook that ends up happening, they end up going insane. And it slowly devolves into a further and further fever dream, which isn't really something you want to watch late at night. But guess what? I made the severe mistake of doing exactly that. And I was just like, what? I will back up a little bit and say that for those of you who have never heard of The Lighthouse, okay. For those of you who know The Lighthouse and know exactly what it's about, or at least have seen the movie before, okay. I do like The Lighthouse. I do like it as a movie. It's just one of those movies that, like, either you hear about it or you don't. And it's not really one that I can say that I feel bad for you if you haven't, but I can't necessarily say that it's a bad thing that you've seen it either. So I don't know where to put it in that sort of realm. And so instead, I will move on to one of the biggest strengths of this movie, and part of the reason that I like it so much, which is that the two lighthouse keepers are a rather younger man and an older man. The younger man is played by Robert Pattinson, aka the actor who was in The Batman in 2022 as Batman. He was also the main vampire character in Twilight, the very bad, ridiculous series of movies about a high school girl who falls in love with an immortal vampire who's at least 100 years older than her. And people never really seem to see any problems with the movies at all because it's cute and heartwarming and definitely not a representation of 2000s movies angst. So imagine the surprise of saying that the guy who played that vampire character, that main love interest, where all the dialogue was horrible and just his acting was absolutely awful, believe it or not, that man is an incredibly talented actor, acclaimed even, specifically for his roles like The Lighthouse, because, and deserving of it too, because let me tell you, if you've only seen reviews of Twilight, you know what the movies are like. You don't even need to watch the movies. You know that Robert Pattinson's like acting in those movies is awful. But anything else he's in, he steals the show. It's such a weird contrast and one of the weirdest things to happen in the current film industry, but I am here for it. I love the fact that he's basically proven everybody wrong into saying that he's just a bad actor who doesn't have anything going for him. And then they see something like The Lighthouse and they go, oh, wait, never mind. He's good. He's really good. Alongside Robert Pattinson playing this younger lighthouse keeper, we also have the older lighthouse keeper, played by Willem Dafoe, who, in case you aren't familiar, is the man who played Green Goblin in the first Spider-Man movie. People love Willem Dafoe for reasons, and they're very good reasons. I do like Willem Dafoe, and I specifically like him in this movie as well. And you may be noticing I'm not really talking about the story or the overall plot elements of the movie, and it's kind of worth talking about why that is. This movie is legitimately just about Robert Pattinson's character and Willem Dafoe's character kind of losing their minds over the course of the movie. It's been described as not really having a straightforward linear plot. It's not one that you can easily nail down. It it doesn't really flip-flop too much, but it doesn't have any like driving narrative. It's a bit difficult to have like a clear and concise narrative, one that really like drives something incredibly forward, something that stands out. It's very difficult to do that when it's about two guys on a remote island managing a lighthouse. What could you possibly do with that? And weirdly enough, they do a lot with it by making them see like weird hallucinations, having strange experiences with the supernatural, and something, kill a seagull and you give them bad luck. And also the light in the lighthouse is magic or something. Your guess is as good as mine. What I will say is that this movie has been described as being very ambiguous. It's described as not really having a definitive plot, and I can definitely agree with that. But people also tend to say that the movie doesn't have a nailed down genre. And that is something that I don't think I want to agree with. Because everything I just described, it sounds crazy and out there, but it makes a lot more sense when you consider the fact that this movie also presents itself as a black and white, old-timey movie that is also a psychological thriller horror movie. When you hear that, you think, oh, wait, all of these weird occurrences, all of this run-ins with the supernatural, all this tension between this older character, this younger character, the way they get driven insane after being with only each other for 4 weeks at a time, and everything kind of seems to unfold, and you understand why these people who are well-acclaimed actors really truly shine on their own. It makes so much sense for it to be a psychological horror movie. It makes sense that someone who's a good actor would be able to pull off that kind of role. Someone who's secretly a good actor like Robert Pattinson, or at least not secret, because in 2019 he was still definitely recognized. But in order to move away from Edward in Twilight series and move into a character who is having to confront the weird reality that he's finding himself stuck in on a remote island in the middle of the sea, having to tend to a lighthouse and having to deal with an insane older man who he's also going insane next to. That kind of thing is ripe for psychological horror, and actors can really prove themselves in a psychological horror setting. What I'm mainly thinking of is The Silence of the Lambs with Anthony Hopkins playing Hannibal the Cannibal. In that movie, the horror is all psychological until it isn't, but even then, Anthony Hopkins is pure psychological peril, and you can only get that from an incredibly trained and incredibly talented actor. And with two of them on board, you get magic. So I have to put my foot down and say fully and explicitly that I do not think The Lighthouse defies genre. It is a psychological horror. You cannot convince me otherwise, from the jump scares, from the overall bleak tone of the thing, from the weird paranormal activities as they slowly lose their sanity and drift further and further into the abyss that is their twisted minds. That is psychological horror. And if you say that it's something like a comedy, that's a very funny way of looking at it. But it's also, in my opinion, extremely wrong. So just keep that in mind. Of course, my opinion doesn't count for everything. I'm just the one with the radio show talking about it. And speaking of having a radio show and talking about things, it's time to bring this radio show where I talk about things to a close. Thank you for listening in to What to Watch Wednesdays. I had fun talking about these movies, especially since it gives me more wiggle room to kind of talk about random movies that don't have any connection to each other, but still use the unifying factor of A24, the production company, being the one thing that they all share in common. Let me tell you, A24 has the reputation for making weird movies. The Lighthouse is no exception. Everything Everywhere All at Once is no exception. And The Green Knight, despite many of its flaws and strengths, it's still quite weird. And oddly enough, The Green Knight is also partially a horror movie if you look at it from a certain angle. But I can't talk about that tonight. So what I will say is, if you are interested in hearing me talk about movies some more, I run What to Watch Weekends, which will be this Saturday at 9 a.m. I run the What to Watch Wednesdays Instagram account at What to Watch Wednesdays, no caps, no spaces. Give me a follow over there if you feel like it. And for me to kind of close this off, I will just simply say that I will be back here on 88.1 The Burg next Wednesday at 8 p.m. So thank you, and I will see you all next time.